So we are beginning to record here so that Hannah can get the lesson a little bit later. So Hannah, as we are saying bye to you, enjoy the homework and then look for the lesson that'll be posted later so you can see the whole thing coherently. It should be on line here probably in 2 hours or so on Google Classroom. Are you getting all this now, Hannah? Yeah, no. Okay.
I just sent it, so it should take a second.
Okay. Okay, so you should get a text, Hannah, so that you can watch the lesson later and actually get it. All right, and with that, we're going to share the screen, and we're going to look at the question along the lines of, what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? Now, if you guys look that up on your phones or on your computers, you probably saw that the church fathers Tertullian once asked the question, what does Athens, that is, what does the philosophy of the Greeks have to do with Jerusalem? From his perspective, that means Christianity, but you could even focus on Judaism as well. Judaism or Christianity, what does that have to do with the Greeks? Well, if you hadn't realized, St. Thomas Aquinas says a lot, right? Athens and Jerusalem have a lot to do with one another. So much so that he goes back to the conceptions of natural law that had really been expressed by Aristotle and says, in actuality, the Greeks weren't wrong here, but it only makes true sense when you have a monotheistic God like the God that we believe in as Christians behind the ordering of nature. And so if we ask the question to St. Thomas Aquinas, what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? He would say a lot. In fact, as we're going to see today, in the Roman Church in the West, there is a lot of Christian emphasis on not just the historic Christian church, but also the age of learning that predated the emergence of Christianity in Greece. And additionally, we'll say also, though not focusing on it as much, there is an emphasis on architecture that, of course, goes back to both Greece, but especially Rome. And we're going to be exploring these questions by looking at Renaissance art. Renaissance, the concept of the Renaissance is that there is a rebirth of learning. A rebirth of learning going back to Rome and even, yes, going clear back to the Greeks, to Aristotle, to Plato, to Socrates. And in embracing this rebirth of learning, there will be an emphasis on all these things. Philosophy, as we've already seen from Aquinas, but also literature. We can look at great literary works from this time period, and it does exactly this. It combines the mythologies of the Greeks and the Romans with Christianity. And so, of course, probably the greatest literary work is a trilogy from this time period, from the 1300s. Does anyone know what trilogy I'm referring to or what author I'm referring to? Anyone? Anyone ever heard of Dante's Inferno?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, okay. So if you are a random person watching this video from outside of St. Anne Christian, we really emphasize the Western classics. So ignore this conversation there. Just throwing that out there. Dante writes 3 books where he, his loved one, I believe her name was Beatrice, dies. And so he goes searching for her, and he searches all of hell in the Inferno. And he goes through all 9 circles of hell down to the very bottom of hell, where he sees the devil, right? In a huge bat-like devil creature that is embedded in the ice. And he's got 3 faces, 3 snouts. And from his snouts are 3 traitors that he is constantly chomping on for all of eternity. And what are those 3 traitors, you might ask? I'm hoping you ask this. Well, it's not just the great Christian traitor. And by the way, who is the greatest traitor in the Christian tradition? The person who is most fundamentally treasonous. In the Christian tradition, who's the biggest traitor, the biggest treasonous, horrible person?
Judas.
There we go, Judas Iscariot. Judas betrays literally God and sends God by betraying him to die the death on a cross. Like, that's treachery beyond treachery. But additionally, not only is Judas being chomped on for all eternity by the devil in the ninth circle of hell, but also you have two other great traitors from the Roman stories. You've got Brutus and Cassius as well, right? Remember the betrayal of Julius Caesar. And so what is the devil doing? He's chomping on these beings for all eternity while his claws are ripping the flesh from Judas's back, and blood and whatever is just oozing from Judas's pussy pory back forever in hell. And so we have, once again, a combination of this conception of hell comes largely out of the Greek and Roman Roman understanding, I guess, of Hades, right? Where you've got this gulf and these various levels, and there you have Satan chomping on people for all of eternity, including Romans. We saw, of course, Aquinas embraces the philosophy of Aristotle, and we could also look at the growth and the complexity in architecture. Goes back and mirrors that from the Romans. Now let's look at art. How many of you like art? Okay, look at all your hands go up. Okay, Maddie says yes, she likes art. Some of my students like all kinds of art. Today, art is something that is believed to be in the eye of the beholder, right? So it's all relative. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So, if you like Michelangelo and I like, a banana stuck to a wall, whatever, whatever you like is art for you. It's relative is the belief that we generally have today. If you like Beethoven or Bach and I like nails on the chalkboard, it's about the same. It's just all up to you. It's relative. Beauty is in the ear of the beholder. Yeah, Christians historically would say that's just totally wrong. That's just stupid. And in fact, if you think about it enough, you'll say, yeah, that is kind of stupid. I don't know if I really want to go that direction with it, though we as a society have clearly done that. And so we're going to be looking at, I think, maybe some of the best art to ever emerge by human beings, and some of the greatest artists to emerge from human beings as well. And I would say that whether you like it or not is not the point. The point is that it's good. Additionally, not only is this art good art, but it is also fusing the best traditions of the Greeks, by the way, the Greeks were very good with statues, statues, and they also seem to be a little bit obsessed with naked people. And for whatever reason, the Renaissance artists, as Christian as they may have been, were also obsessed with naked people. So when you combine naked people with biblical stories, you get like a massively naked David. So thanks, Michelangelo, for that. But don't worry. I know some of you are worried. You are worried that you're going to see far too much Renaissance art with far too much nakedness. No, I have appropriately placed signs and leaves. You're welcome. First, though, let's look at the crucifixion of Christ. On the left-hand side, you see a Western style or Eastern style, Eastern or Western. It's actually a Western icon, but it's done in more of the Eastern style. And none of us in this particular class period went to the Eastern Orthodox Church and talked to Father Stephen. But the idea of an icon is not meant to be some sort of a snapshot in time, but rather that the icon is a window into an eternal reality. And so Jesus, as depicted as dying on the cross, is not intended to be a snapshot in time, but the eternal crucified Christ is what it is to be a window into. And so the East purposefully tries to make sure it doesn't look three-dimensional, but rather looks two-dimensional. In the West, however, iconography changes and becomes very artistic. And then with the Renaissance artists, we have sort of the growth of this three-dimensional art. So we have the crucified Christ on the right as well. And this, I believe, was done in the 1500s, 1511, sticks in my head, but that could be wrong. It might have been late 1400s, somewhere in there. Painted by a Renaissance artist. And if you were to ponder, excuse me, these two depictions, or these two images of Christ, how many of you, and of course I can't see Eli, I don't know where he went, he's probably still here somewhere in the background, but how many of you would say, yeah, I prefer to ponder the Christ on the left? You know, very flat, kind of awkward looking. How many of you would say, no, if I was to really focus on one of these images and ponder the image, I prefer to look at the one on the right and ponder the image on the right? How many of you are like, I don't know about images. I don't think about images at all. All right, there's Emma. Thank you, Emma. Good for you. Emma's a big fan of art. She loves to ponder art. Not very much, I guess. So once again, notice the three-dimensionality of this. You've got the dead body of Christ on the left, and you've got all the saints with their halos around their heads taking Jesus off. It's intended, rather than to show something three-dimensional, to show very basically some sort of a spiritual reality, whereas the one on the right shows the physicality of this. And you can see, of course, that the saints that are looking onto the dead body of the three-dimensional Christ, they are lacking halos. However, Maddie and Emma, look at Jesus in the image on the right. Is there a halo around his head? Look close. It's very light. Do you see it? It's right here. See that? There is still a halo around Jesus's head, but it's much more faint. And so here we see this drawing out of the sort of physicality and the humanity of Christ. Getting to know the EBs pretty well here over the last couple of years, I learned something that I did not realize, and this might be true for you guys as well. I outside of a school, I sort of have my own religious circle that I run in. And, as Lutherans, we're perfectly fine with images. We like Renaissance art. We like icons. We can hang them in our churches. We're good. It's not, we don't use them the same way that the Orthodox do, but we're not offended by them. What I didn't realize was the extent to which today in Calvinism, iconoclasm is still a thing. Do you guys remember what the word iconoclasm means?
No.
I suspected not. So if you remember back to the time when the Muslims were running amok and the Christians were like, oh, images are bad. We should smash the images. Images of Jesus are bad. And so the icon smashers were called iconoclasts. They were iconoclastic. They smashed the icons. The icon kissers were called orthodox, right? And I did not realize the extent to which many Calvinists were still iconoclastic. They do not like images of Jesus, but most especially, they don't like the idea of depicting the invisible God, like God the Father or God in his wholeness. And what we have here is two different images of God. We have God the Creator by Michelangelo, with, of course, Adam there and a sign appropriately placed, just to keep things from being too awkward, if you know what I mean. And then we also have God on the left portrayed. So the God on the right, the Creator, is, an old man with 2 legs, 2 arms, and a big bushy white beard. Is this appropriate, do you think, to depict God in this fashion? Well, this is a question that some of us might struggle with because, after all, what does it say in the Ten Commandments? Thou shalt not make for thyself,
Idols.
yes, any idols or graven images. You can't depict God, but what happens when God becomes man? That's the question, and Christians have answered this historically by saying you can depict Jesus. What about the Holy Trinity or God? And so here we have God, the three persons of God. And by the way, we can tell the character here in the middle is the person of whom. So yes, this is supposed to be an image of God, the one God in three persons. What do you think of that? Emma doesn't think much about it. So this is Jesus in the middle. You can tell because he's got the robes. You've got the divinity here in the blue, and you've got the humanity or the blood in the red, and you've got him making the sign of blessing over the Eucharist. Okay, that's fine. And then we've got the other members of the Holy Trinity here in this image. Now, the iconoclast would say this is just terrible. The reason I show this here for you is to suggest that the reason for the one on the left being very flat, clearly being an icon, not intending to depict what God actually looks like at all, but rather it depicts the theology. And then to the one on the right, God is depicted in this one very much as a three-dimensional old man giving life to Adam. And so once again, please notice the changes. Now, the next question would be, are these different images used differently? Well, the answer is yes, they are used quite differently. The one on the left, the icon, is used in Orthodoxy as a window into the reality of the eternal worship of heaven, where this is just supposed to be a picture of a point in time when God gave Adam life. And so Michelangelo draws this, paints this, in fact, on the ceiling of?
Sistine Chapel?
Yeah, you're right, on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And hey, Mr. Schweiger, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. I've got my little class here.
Medieval versus Renaissance. Oh, you guys are learning about art?
We're learning about art, yes.
Oh,
Emma's loves art. She's like, I just can't wait. She has a lot of opinions on it.
that's good that you covered up Adam there. That wouldn't be SC appropriate.
See, Mr. Schweigert recognized my thinking along these things. Very good. So here we see again the God bearer, the Theotokos. When you think about it, Mother Mary, the Virgin Mary, was the throne of God for 9 months. That's a pretty remarkable thought. And we can see that the Virgin Mary on the left in the 1200s is holding the Christ child. Notice he looks very creepy, but at least he's making the sign of the cross. The goal here, and notice this with the icons of the Blessed Virgin Mary holding the Christ child, he looks like a creepy little man more often than not. You know what I'm saying? Not so much in this one. I mean, a little bit in this one. But in the Renaissance paintings, no. If you're going to be depicting the Christ as an infant, he should look actually like an infant, not like a creepy little dude. And so here, of course, we can see that this is very three-dimensional. You've got the Virgin Mary holding the Christ child. And if you want to get painted into this, you can pay to have yourself painted in. So see these people. So here you have like an almost naked dude. You've got a monk standing by the almost naked dude. You've got another almost naked dude over here, and then another monk. These people were all members of wealthy families that were patrons to these artists. And so you could actually get your own portrait painted in to a picture of something in Christianity. We also have like a guitarist here playing below Jesus. So think like Woodstock. In fact, when you think about it, this is like Woodstock 1969 meets the Virgin Mary. You got naked dude, guitar player, passed out person. To me, that sounds like America. These artists, though, unlike previous monks and efforts at icon making, These artists were not only focused on religious subjects or religious themes. You had someone like Raphael, who very famously paints here the School of Athens. You can see this in real life. I believe this is in the Vatican Museum, which is connected to the Sistine Chapel. And so probably the two best museums for art in the world are the Vatican in Rome and also the Louvre in Paris. I'm not sure which one is better. I myself prefer the Vatican, primarily due to the fact that it's predominantly religious, where the Louvre kind of can go more directions. But regardless, here we've got, of course, Plato and Aristotle. One's pointing to the forms, the realm of the forms. The other, Aristotle, saying, no, let's look here around on the earth. Very interesting. Michelangelo is probably the greatest of these artists, or maybe Da Vinci. It's hard to say for sure. Michelangelo was a great sculptor. This is David. This is most of David. Entertainingly, I presented this or something similar to junior high students at one point, and I thought it would be appropriate to make sure that leaves were placed in certain spots on the images, just to keep the junior highers from giggling too much, right? Well, it was all fine and good until the computer that I was presenting on reformatted everything when I was presenting it and moved the leaves to like 3 inches or 5 inches one direction or the other. So yeah, it didn't help. And then the kids thought it was even funnier because the leaves that I had put to cover up David was like still there, just like over here on the other side of the screen. There's David again, by the way. This is the replica. The original is here in the building in Florence. The replica is outside where the original stood for several centuries. Isn't that crazy? The statue is 500 years old. Isn't that crazy? Guess what was happening in America 500 years ago? Nothing English, that's for sure. The English didn't show up till 1607. Okay, so pretty much unless you were Native American, or if you wanted to run around and kill Native Americans like the Spanish did, that would be about it. This is my favorite of the sculptures that Michelangelo does. It's called the Pieta. He was only 24 years old when he did this. Notice again, it's the same concept as before. You've got the Blessed Virgin Mary being, in a sense, the throne of God, but in this case, he's been crucified and he is dead. Notice how young and innocent the Blessed Virgin looks, while Christ is mangled and beaten and lies dead and limp in her arms. Really a remarkable sculpture and an interesting take on an image like this. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a really interesting take on that. So it's currently in St. Peter's Basilica. If you step inside and step across the keys, look to the right, you'll see the Pieta there. It is definitely worth going and pondering. That's the great thing about this art. Whether you understand all the complexities of it or not, the theology that is relayed within the art is definitely worth pondering. So you ponder not just the beauty of the art itself, but also you ponder what it means. This could distract you if your church had all these images, I suppose, all over the place. For instance, if you went to church and your pastor was droning on and on and on about something, you're like, buddy, seriously, 15 minutes is up. Why are you still talking? You could always get distracted and look up at the ceiling and see all sorts of images from the Bible. Now, you might notice that half of these people up here are pretty darn naked. But that's why it's a picture from a long distance. Pretty awkward in church. That, by the way, is exactly how the Pope felt in the 1700s. See, Michelangelo, this was his last great painting, the Final Judgment, which is on the back wall of the Sistine Chapel. You can see the altar pieces down here. You've got the crucified Christ, the crucifix with you can't see the altar, but this is behind the altar. And it got to be awkward when Christians later were like, you know what, we're very nervous about all this nakedness. And so the Pope actually hired someone to come in and paint clothes on a lot of these people. So a lot of the clothes you see here is actually added on later. In fact, if you think about it, clothes in hell doesn't make a lot of sense. You know what I'm saying? Because it would catch on fire and burn up, and then you'd be naked anyway. So there's that. Kind of interesting. N.T. Wright one time, the great Anglican theologian and bishop, was sitting one time in the Sistine Chapel for one sort of ecumenical thing or another, and he was sitting next to an Eastern Orthodox priest, or probably a bishop of some sort, and he was looking around at all the images, and of course the Western Church uses imagery very differently than the Eastern Church. And he was saying, he says, I understand the paintings on the ceilings. Like I get like God giving life to Adam. I get the flood, you know. And he looks over on the wall to the right. He's like, I understand these images and I understand those images over there, but I don't understand the image here on the back wall. What is going on here? And it's because the Orthodox have a very different comprehension of sort of the separation of the sheep and the goats and the last judgment and heaven and hell, especially what is going on down here. You see the Orthodox, they would say that God is a good God who loves mankind, and the end of humanity, that is the ultimate goal, is not this sort of a division. Kind of an interesting thought. Some believe that Michelangelo, being a very old man, actually painted himself into this image right here. I don't know if that's Michelangelo or not. If that is, he doesn't look very healthy. Here we have again the Blessed Virgin Mary holding the very chubby Christ child, which, okay. At least he doesn't look like a creepy adult like he does in some of those. Here we have Pope Leo X. I want you to take a good look at that face and realize he's going to have some problems. We're going to talk about those coming up here in just a little bit. Not today, but later on down the line. He was a Medici, a very wealthy patron family in Florence. Of course, it's very helpful if you want to be Pope to come from a wealthy family that can get you in there. And he's going to have some peculiar, he's a messed up, we'll just say he's a messed up person. Apparently, for one of his birthdays, everyone knew he really was a big fan of little cherubs, which is really creepy. Like, what sort of a guy is a fan of little naked children? And apparently they painted these boys to jump out of his birthday cake, painted them gold, and they died of poisoning after that. Apparently you can't paint children with medieval sorts of paint. Well, there you go. Good times. Thanks for that, Pope Leo X. And by the way, if you like, how many of you like sinning? Anyone in there is like, I would really just like to be able to sin. Sinning is good. Anyone want to throw up your hands? And I know you're tempted. Okay. Maddie, no? Eli, sinning is good. Hannah is not with us at the moment. If sinning is good, and getting forgiveness is difficult because you have to actually go confess your sins to the priest for the priest to absolve you, which, by the way, is, Protestants say this, in criticism of Catholics all the time. And I'm like, seriously, when would you ever do this? You have to go, they say, well, the Catholics, they just sin all week and then they just go confess their sins to the priest, as if confessing your sins to a priest is easy. Give me a break. Who wants to go do that? You know, it'd be better if you could just buy forgiveness. It's a lot easier to pay $10 for a sheet that says you're forgiven than it is to go actually tell the priest all the crap you did. You know what I'm saying? And so this guy's a guy who wants to raise some money for the church by selling forgiveness. We call that selling indulgences. Don't worry, the Pope will indulge your sins provided you pay enough money. And you can also get your Uncle Joe, who died outside of forgiveness as well, get him out of purgatory. It's a good thing. Don't worry about it. Leonardo da Vinci. You can see, of course, he looks like Santa Claus gone wrong. I would run screaming if I saw him coming my direction. Although it turns out he was quite brilliant. He lived until 1519. This is just 2 years after the Protestant Reformation begins. Not even that, because, whatever. He's very talented at a lot of different things. And if you've ever heard the term Renaissance man, it can apply to someone like Da Vinci. He was known for his paintings. He was known for his ideas, his interest in anatomy. And they say, I guess, is he even actually had the idea of maybe developing some sort of a helicopter back in the late 1400s. Regardless, here's his baptism of the Christ by John the Baptist. And we can see, of course, the Holy Spirit descending as a dove from heaven, and God the Father's hands essentially bringing that down. More interestingly, though, would be works like this, the Last Supper. I'm sure you've seen this before. We're not going to spend a whole bunch of time on it. It is three-dimensional. It's within the house. Unfortunately, it was painted using experimental paints, and so it's all flaking off. In another 150, 200 years, there'll be nothing left but a blank canvas. So enjoy it now, guys. You've probably seen the Mona Lisa. You guys know anything about the Mona Lisa? Let me just say that if you go to the Louvre in Paris, there are going to be signs all over Paris that point to the Louvre. They're like, Mona Lisa, that direction. So you follow the signs to the Mona Lisa, and then you go into the Louvre, and then there's signs all over it. Mona Lisa down this hallway, Mona Lisa down this direction. Go here, go there. You know, it's dumb. And then you go past halls and hallways of magnificent sculpture and art of all different kinds, religious art. I remember first time I went through there in the Louvre trying to find the Mona Lisa, there was a massive canvas like the size of the wall in my classroom, like the size of the whole front of my classroom. And it was this incredible work of religious art of Christ dying on the cross, and everyone around observing the death of Christ. And you're like, wow, that's impressive. I don't know who painted it. And you can't read anything. It's all in Italian. I don't know who painted that, but it looks cool. And then you finally get past all that for the super exciting, Mona Lisa exhibit. And you find out that Mona Lisa has the whole wall dedicated to herself. And she's like that big. It's so incredibly underwhelming that you kind of feel like the Louvre is putting something over on you, sold you a bill of goods or something, right? Maybe missing the forest for the trees. Maybe, you see a little ding on the car and you ignore the rest, like something like that, where it's just not, it's not balanced, this Mona Lisa thing. So anyway, it is three-dimensional. It is different. It's different than the way that art had been previously. And so if we were to ask the question, what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? It turns out in the years immediately previous to the Protestant Reformation, a whole lot. Philosophically, artistically, architecturally, all these things borrow heavily from the ancients, from pre-Christian and from the Roman period, in order to basically enhance Christianity in this age of learning. So why did the age of learning happen? Why in the 1300s and the 1400s you kind of have this growth of learning? Well, guys, it really helps when all the barbarians and the Vikings have been Christianized and there's not a whole bunch of rape and murder and stuff anymore, pillaging. When things calm down a bit, you can focus more on art and literature and this sort of thing. And so there was relative years of peace in Europe. The Vikings had calmed down, allowed for the church to really focus on these things. But of course, nothing good lasts forever. And so the Protestant Reformation is right around the corner. And maybe you would say, well, that is good. The Protestant Reformation is good because it brings the pure gospel back to Christians. And that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later. All right, guys, for the rest of class, if you haven't finished your journal entry, go ahead and do that. Hopefully you took a picture of or a screenshot of the questions for James. And then also in your Google Classroom, you'll find that there is an assignment watching the first 31 minutes of a 56-minute video on the traditions surrounding Eastertide and Passiontide in Europe that Rick Steves takes you on this journey. Rick Steves, kind of an interesting little guy, likes Europe a whole bunch. This little ELCA Lutheran, liberal Lutheran dude who's likes pot, I guess, a lot, wants pot all to be legalized in the United States, just like it is in Europe. He's a big fan. So anyway, there's that. He's a big guy who's into PBS, public broadcasting. You're going to love it, I think. So I'll let you guys get to that. If you have any questions, please stay on. If you don't, we'll see ya.
Thank you.